Good evening, everybody. I'm Mohit. I'm a third generation bookseller based out of Jaipur, running this independent bookstore called Rajat Book Corner. And for the last almost 6 hours, I've been wondering and working on the introductions for this event. We've been luckily doing a lot of, author interactions for the last 2 or 3 years. A lot of them on ground at majestic places like Hawa Mahal, like Jantar Mantar, Albert Hall, and even the Amir Palace. But because of everything going digital, we also had, the bookstores also had to go digital. But having written almost, drafts of 30, 35 odd pages of such introductions, I realized I am a bookseller. And my job is simply to bring out the book and tell you why and why, which book to read and why to read it. Today we have a wonderful, a great academician and historian, and along with him an intellectual celebrity, if I could say so. I will just give a brief introduction about both of them. Vikram Sampath, Bangalore-based historian, is the author of 5 acclaimed books: Splendours of Royal Mysore, My Name is Gauhar, Jaan, The Life and Times of a Musician, Voice of the Veena, S. Balachander, A Biography, Savarkar, Echoes from a Forgotten Past, and Savarkar, A Contested Legacy. He was awarded the Sahitya Akademi's first Yuva Puraskar in English literature and ARSC International Award for Excellence in Historical Research in New York for his book on Gauhar Jaan. With him in conversation, we have Kunal Kapoor, who's an actor, entrepreneur, writer, and now producer. He has been a part of films like Rang De Basanti, which of course all of us have enjoyed thoroughly, Laga Chunari Mein Daag, Bachna Hai Hasino, Love Shavte, Chicken Khurana, and Veeram. And if Kunal could allow me to borrow a dialogue from one of his recent movies to open the session today. हम सब के अंदर 2 शख्स होते हैं, एक शरीफ जिसे हम दुनिया से मिलाते हैं और दूसरा बदमाश जिसे हम छुपाते हैं.
This is in context to you, Vikram.
This is also the context to the subject matter of today's conversation, Vinayak Damodar Savarkar. The entire subject this person has divided the thought process of a country into 2 segments. And how? One, who call him a nationalist, believe him and totally worship him, and the other where he's called a traitor and people despise him like anything. I would now just get out of the way and get you, Kunal, in conversation with Vikram. Kunal, if you could take
Thank you so much.
One more thing, while you're watching this, you can put your questions in the chat box and we'll eventually pick it up from there and ask Vikram. Over to you, Kunal.
Hi, Vikram. Lovely doing this and lovely to chat with you.
Hi, Kunal.
Like I said, I read the book and I was just incredibly blown away by the detailing, the amount of research that's gone into it, and the passion that you have for this story. And so I want to start off by the first question is why Savarkar? I mean, you put in 5 years of your life into this, researching, writing, putting this book out there. What was it about his life and his legacy and this person that fascinated you so much? And when did the curiosity about his life first begin?
Right. So thank you, Kunal, and thank you for doing this in the midst of your upcoming, show series, for which I know you're in a lot of the promotion buzz that's going on. So thank you so much for joining in, and thank you, Mohit, for hosting us. I think that's a great way to begin, Kunal. And I always say a biography is akin to a love affair. You fall in love with a subject, just as you fall in love with someone, and then for a long time, you chase your love interest. Every little letter that he or she has written, you stalk them everywhere on social media, like you do probably in real life. You'd go and rummage every little bit that the person has written. Their friends become your friends, their enemies become your enemies. Sometimes in the course of this love affair, the biographer also might get cheated, where he or she might think that the subject was not worthy of his love interest, and the love collapses, like probably it does in real life as well. But then those who sustain the interest of the writer, I think the subjects then proceed to the point where the writer is supposed to commit it to print, and thereupon the biographer, there's a huge responsibility that comes on him or her, which is to cut off all emotional cords from the subject. And suddenly, you're consumed by the subject for so long, for years together. You probably know more about the subject than the subject themselves knew, because you know the angles of, other people who are not privy to what our subject knew. But when you're writing it, you're supposed to become this bystander, a third party. And because then there's a very thin line between a hagiography and a biography. You tend to become your subject's lawyer, rather subconsciously. You start defending them and so on. And a person as contentious as Savarkar, you're only tempted as his writer to kind of negate all the calumny that is hurled on him, all the allegations that are made all the time. So there's that huge responsibility on the part of the biographer, the historian, to step back. And that's, I think, the toughest part. And I remember what Lytton Strachey, the English biographer of Queen Victoria and Elizabeth and all of them, had said that we seldom, ponder to reflect that it is perhaps as difficult to write a good life as it is to live one. So I think, it's really, really difficult. And that whole emotional journey that a writer goes through, as I said, it's a sense of void once it's all over, that I've spent about 5 years of my life in the last 5 years researching about this very, very complicated man, trying to wrap my head around many things he did not do or could have done, and all of that, which we, through the luxury of retrospective assessment, can always see. But then wrapping around your head around that, making sense of him, and also trying to present him in a way that today's generation can understand, that's been a big challenge. But to your main question as to why Savarkar, I think why not Savarkar? Because I think he's one person whom, as even Mohit just mentioned, divides public opinion in such a polarizing way, as do several historical characters. But someone whose thoughts are so relevant, someone who becomes the subject of election speeches, political parties, their manifestos, raucous news debates, and all of that on a daily basis, which very few characters of the past, and particularly of the freedom struggle, actually occupy this kind of center space of public discussion today. But alarmingly, and as a historian, as someone who's an academic, when I look back at what if a young man or woman today in India wants to look back and read about this man, about whom there's such a lot of hullabaloo, what's the latest book that he or she can look back on? The full-length biography of Savarkar, in English at least, was written in the 1960s by this man called Dhananjay Keer. And Dhananjay Keer was someone who worked with Savarkar. He was a acolyte. So obviously the account was very, very glowing. It was almost hagiographical. In every sentence, he was praising him to the skies and so on. But it's nonetheless a very good attempt to put his whole life together in one place. But after that, from 1960 till 2019, when the first volume came, I was rather amazed by this singular lack of any kind of curiosity, academic curiosity by historians, mainstream historians, to chronicle the life of a man they either loved so much or hated so much. I have no problem with people hating him, but then let it be informed hatred. You read about the person, you get to know all aspects of the person, and then you having an opinion for or against is good enough. But here that was not to be. So the idea was to put together in the public domain all these archival documents, various facets of his life, a lot of his life that was written in Marathi, in his own words, which have not come to the public domain in mainstream historiography. So the idea was to put all of that together and let the discerning reader make up her mind as to what she thinks, how she assesses Savarkar and his contribution to the country, to the freedom struggle, the political ideology that he propounded, Hindutva, and how that is in ascendancy today across the country. So to that extent, understanding the father of Hindutva, to understand India today, becomes so relevant. And as I said, it's very alarming that we get so excited about characters of the past, but we don't invest so much in a detailed scholarly study of them. We're very touchy about it, but we don't invest time in understanding them or the times that they lived in.
Right. But when you start writing a book like this on somebody who a lot of books have been written about, And there's a lot of different versions. Some paint, all of them paint him in different lights, right? Did you start off by reading any of the books that were already written about him, or what was the starting point? Where did the research for this book actually begin from?
Oh, wow. I wish I remembered. It was 5 years ago, and I remember that, this man's life. I mean, he was born in 1883. He died in 1966. So a long span of almost 84 years, which also coincided with probably the most tumultuous era of Indian history. The March to Freedom, the partition, pre-independence, post-independence. There's a plethora of characters who also came. And at some point, I was, to be honest, very diffident about whether I'd be even able to do justice to this person, because unlike the other books, someone like a Gauhar, Jaan or so, about whom there was precious little material that was available. In this case, it was a problem of plenty. There was just too much of material. So I remember talking to my mother then and expressing my diffidence, and she told me something interesting which stayed with me, through the course. She said, she was not a mountain climber herself, luckily, but then she said, if you're trekking Mount Everest, never keep looking at this, the peak and seeing how much farther you are from the peak. Just take one step at a time, and before you realize, you'll be at the summit. And that's what I did, where every portion of his life, his childhood, then his youth, a lot of the activity that he did in London as a revolutionary, and then the social reforms that he undertook in Ratnagiri, and his Hindu Mahasabha presidentship days, each of it divided into segments. That's how I decided to tackle this subject, because the span was so vast and there were so many other characters: Gandhi, Nehru, Sardar Patel, Jinnah, Ambedkar, and a host of others, and the revolutionaries too, who were his contemporaries. So I think somewhere the research actually started outside India, in London, in the British Archives and the National Archives of UK, where voluminous amount, almost 25,000 pages of archival material that I managed to collect only on Savarkar while I was there. And just to read through all of that and trying to make sense of it was a humongous task. And I remember remembering you there, because among the proscribed material that was there in the London archives were the accounts of the HRA, and Ram Prasad Bismil, of Ashfaqullah Khan, and Azad, including, an entire set of poetry that Ram Prasad Bismil had written. We only remember Sarfaroshi ki tamanna ab hamare dil mein hai, but there were so many other poems that he had written, and all that proscribed literature sits there in the London archives of our heroes who died, for us and for our country's freedom. And just to hold that in your hand was enough to give me goosebumps, because and there was something about Ashfaq.
I'm getting goosebumps, right?
Yeah, I remember coming back to my hotel room and actually breaking down, because it was there was also a little slim booklet, which was the autobiography of Bismil, where he talked about his time with the Kakori case and all of that, Bhagat Singh and all those associations. And it so happens that, since we've not seen too many pictures of them, those who have enacted that role on screen, I think the minute you say Ashfaqullah, it's your face that comes to people's minds. So I do remember very vividly, while I was reading that, it was the same, whoever had played the respective roles, Amir Khan as Azad and all of them. It was really, really very, it had been implanted in the head in some way. So yeah, I think a lot of material of Indian history sits outside India, and maybe it's good because it's also very well catalogued, easily accessible for scholars, unlike what it is in India. Perhaps it's quite a difficult task to get to facts and to get documents out of places where access is not easily allowed.
Right. But coming back to something that you said, I know a lot of people keep pushing you. Why is there no conclusion in the end? There should be a conclusion. The author should have a conclusion at the end of the book. And you said that, when you're writing a book about somebody like this, it becomes a love story, because you're spending so much time with them, chronicling, writing down things about them, collecting letters, information, meeting people who knew them. And then at some point you have to sort of detach from that.
Yeah.
Right? Because you want to be as objective as possible.
Right.
Is that possible to detach yourself? And also, did you find yourself in some places thinking that, look, I'm not being objective now, I'm being biased. I need to step back for a couple of days and come back to this again. Did that ever happen? Where you caught yourself being completely biased and not being objective, and then step back and said, look, I've got to take a break from this?
That's a tricky question. Yes. Yes. And to many instances. And the problem, Kunal, with a person like him, on whom there are, I think, a plethora of allegations that in today's context, right from, he sold out to the British, he wrote these groveling petitions, and he was a traitor and all kinds of things. He wrote his own autobiography. He called himself Veer. All kinds of allegations are heard. And of course, his role as alleged by people in Gandhi's murder. So all of this, a person who's writing about him and who, if you're writing it objectively, you're also having some kind of interest in the subject, unless you have an agenda only to demonize the person. Then the drive to actually kind of rationalize these allegations and give supporting facts, that is really very rife. And especially the petition part, I was really trying to. And most people structure books like that. It's either a series of allegations hurled at the reader saying, he did this, or it's like a defense lawyer talking, saying why he or she does not think that these were apology letters or whatever else. But I thought I'll take the mid ground, where I give a context that in which these were written, whether it was a petition or it was the assassination of Gandhi or whatever. Put a lot of those documents in the appendices so that people can see it for themselves. And after judging both the things, you have the documents, you have the context. You please read through it, and after reading all of that, if you still feel that this person was a traitor to the country and to its freedom struggle, then that's perfectly your opinion. Because I think a historian does not have the right to sit in judgment of characters of the past. We have the luxury, as I said, of retrospective looking back, where we can very easily say someone could have done this or should have done that, but we are not in that time, we are not in their shoes, so we really don't know if any one of us is left in cellular jail to rot in the way that Savarkar or several others were for 11 years, for 14 years. I don't know what we would have done to get ourselves out when there was nothing else, no other way, because 50 long years was his life sentence there. You could probably come out and do a lot more for the country than rotting there. So a lot of these arguments keep coming up. But yes, I have tried to step back at those times and say, hey, I think you're getting too much into the skin of the character and trying to defend him. So let's not do that. Let the reader, let's not underestimate the intelligence of the reader. I think the reader can make up their own minds. Everything need not be spoon-fed and made available to them, because I only have the privilege of putting my thoughts in print as a writer. But a reader can form his or her opinions. Only thing, they don't have the privilege of putting it out in print. So let it be that they make up their minds based on all the documents that I illuminate, for them.
Yeah, I always find that tricky. As an actor, I think it's very easy to be objective because you're playing a part,
right?
And you're acting a part, and you're just being as honest as you can to the director and the writer's vision, right? You're going with what they put on paper. But the question is, when they're putting that on paper, is it possible for them to not be biased?
Yeah.
And that I think is tricky for writers and filmmakers, not so much for actors, but people like you. Especially with like we were talking about a subject like this, it becomes very difficult to sort of keep a distance and try and be as objective as possible. But I have to say, you've done really well, and I really, like you said, I never felt like it was written in a way that was either a judgment or a defense. I felt like you left it to the reader's intelligence to look at the facts, look at the circumstances, and then make an informed decision on their own.
Right.
I think that's the best way to do it, really.
You just lead, like I think in a film, you just lead the reader through those times. You're just taking them back to an era, recreate the entire era and what the circumstances were. And like Alice in Wonderland, I think the reader can then look around and make up her mind very well. I think it's a better approach to history writing than, in 2021, the kind of things that we can say about someone in 1893. I think it's a little odd. We can't really do that.
Right. And coming to his life, I mean, you mentioned the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi, and you spoke about how that really sort of, it said that he almost was somebody that became an untouchable in a way, when nobody wanted to associate themselves with him after the allegations came up. So it's very difficult to talk about Vinayak Savarkar without talking about Mahatma Gandhi.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so what was it that made them such bitter rivals, and what were the main sort of ideological differences between them that kept cropping up?
Yeah, I think these two, they're like the opposite sides of the coin, and just as two opposite sides of the coin would never meet, I think these two also would never meet. And I think they were different in every possible way. And if you remember in the volume 1, I quoted these very interesting snippets of anecdotes of how the two people actually met. First in London when they were young men, and Savarkar was then in the India House in London, and a Brahmin there, and Gandhi comes to meet him, and he sees Savarkar in the kitchen cooking prawns, and he offers him prawns to eat, and then he says, no, I'm a vegetarian and I'm not going to eat this. And then he admonishes him saying, this is only boiled fish. We want to train young men who can go and eat up the British alive, and you can't even eat boiled fish. if you don't eat with us, how can we work together? And a few years later, they again meet during the Dashera festival, where they're called upon to address the Indian diaspora there in London. And Gandhi makes this thing that I'm not going to talk anything political. I'll talk about the glory of Ram Rajya and the importance of ahimsa and all of that. To which Savarkar follows him immediately in the speech and rebuts him completely, saying, you spoke about Ram Rajya, but even to establish Ram Rajya, Ram had to kill Ravan. He did not go and do an ahimsa satyagraha in front of Ravan saying, please let Sita out. And we're talking this during the Dashera, the 9 days when the Devi is celebrated and venerated with all her, weapons and armors and all of that. And that's not just for a decorative piece, but annihilation of evil is considered to be legitimate in Indian or in the Hindu philosophy. So if you consider the British as an evil, the British Raj as an evil, then using arms and taking up arms to eliminate this power from this country is not something bad. So I think the differences came from there, the fundamental difference. I don't think both of them wanted the same objective, which was the liberation of the country. Neither of them can be doubted on that. But I think the road that they took to that was so vastly different. One, completely in this Tolstoyan and, Christianized kind of a non-violent view of things. And the other who said, no, if someone is evil to you, you pay back in the same coin. You don't show your other cheek if you're slapped on one, tit for tat. So I think that fundamental difference was what initially set them apart, and these ideological differences carried on all through their lives, whether it came to social reforms, where Savarkar was someone who propagated a completely casteless society where everybody was equal, and he wanted a complete elimination even of the Varna system, the Varnashram system itself. Whereas Gandhi, on the other hand, was saying that I don't consider the Varna as being odious. I think it's very important to have the Varnas. He was more about eradication of untouchability, but then the Varna and how it segregated people into the livelihoods that they were part of, that is very important according to Gandhi. So these differences came out there too, and the whole Shuddhi movement, where people who were converted out of Hinduism either by coercion or by allurements, they had no mechanism to come back to the parent faith if they wanted to. So this is something that Savarkar observed in the cellular jail too, and using a leaf out of Swami Dayanand Saraswati and the Arya Samaj, he started this whole reconversion movement, which was hitherto not there in Hinduism because we're not a proselytizing kind of a faith. And so on that too, there was a lot of disagreement between the two people. There's also a very illuminating conversation between Savarkar and Maulana Shaukat Ali in the second volume, where it almost seems like a conversation happening today in the context of all this Ghar Wapsi and all of that we're seeing, where Savarkar says, you are allowed to Shaukat Ali that while you are allowed to become organized, sangathit. But then we are not allowed to organize ourselves. We have nothing against you. We're just doing it out of self-defense and for self-protection. We have nothing, there's no animosity towards anybody. So why is that not allowed? So a huge dialogue which runs to almost 6 pages between the two of them, which is very, very illuminating of how things for the last 90 years, we've been talking about the same things in Indian society. Then the two men also differed on, I think, the other problem that they faced, which was Hindu-Muslim unity, which Gandhi said he always strove for it. And Savarkar countered saying, if you have to strive for something, that means it doesn't exist, so what's natural, we don't have to strive for it. So the very fact that you're talking about this says that there are fundamental differences between these two communities. There's a civilizational conflict, which is what is causing these fissures. So while their approach to that too differed, where Gandhi wanted to mollify a particular community or so on, Savarkar said everybody is going to be treated equally. There's no one is going to get extra concessions, privileges, etc. In free India, in the Hindu Rashtra that he had perceived of, everybody was supposed to be equal in the eyes of the law. Even the Hindus were not getting any extra privileges, nor was there going to be any state religion. No religion was to be taught in schools for children. So it was a completely what we would today deem as a secular state. So I think it's a very fascinating contrast, the two ideas of India, so to say, which are competing with each other. And rather, ironically, their photographs hang diametrically opposite to each other in the Central Hall of Parliament. I don't know who placed it so prophetically. I don't credit our leaders with so much of metaphorical intelligence. But the very fact that they'd actually put these two photographs diametrically opposite to each other, that's exactly how these two people, as I see them, posited as two irreconcilable poles of Indian history. And so be it. Many different ideas of what India is, was, and should be. These are two versions which we have, which, as I said, can never perhaps meet because there was no common ground. There was no meeting point on anything.
That's actually what I was going to ask you, is that, everybody talks about their differences.
Yeah.
But besides the fact that they both wanted, obviously, freedom,
yeah.
Was there ever a common meeting ground between the two? Was there anything in common in terms of ideology? Anything that was similar?
I don't think I could think of even one such, because there was just such ideological differences. And in fact, in 1926 or 27, Gandhiji comes to Ratnagiri, where Savarkar was under house arrest. And the two of them meet. They have almost a debate for about 2-3 hours, where Gandhi tries to dissuade him from, the Shuddhi movement, and says, the Muslim community is getting very insecure because of this, and we should stop this movement and all of that. But and then there's a lot of other things about the revolutionary movement and how Gandhi was constantly not acknowledging the sacrifices of young men who were a part of the revolution, whether it was Jatin Das, whether it was Bhagat Singh, whether it was the whole Kakori, case, martyrs during that time in the 1920s. And they debated a lot about this. And I think at the end of 3 hours, Gandhi realized that the two of them had no meeting ground at all. And he's going away. And then while going, he says, I know we have irreconcilable differences, but I hope you will allow me to do my experiments, which I'm trying to do for the country. And so Savarkar is supposed to have said, and there's an eyewitness whom I quote in the book, saying, Mahatma ji, you are of course free to do whatever, experiments you are going to do, but do remember that these are going to be at the cost of the nation. And maybe prophetically so, in the way things unfolded in the next 20 years. A lot of this also led to where, what happened of the subcontinent, the partition, the horrors that followed, and the perennial instability in which the subcontinent finds itself even today, 75 years later. So unfortunately, yeah, to your question, I don't know these two men in their lifetime. They met all of 3 times, the first 2 in London and 1 in Ratnagiri, and they never met again. They exchanged a lot of letters between each other, but they never met each other after that, because I think Gandhi also realized that this man and I are complete, opposites.
Wow, that's very unusual, no, for two people to have nothing in common.
Nothing in common. Yeah.
But in fact, there's a lot of people that say that Savarkar and Jinnah were, 2 sides of the same coin, and that they probably had more in common in terms of the way they thought and the ideology. What were Savarkar's views on partition? Was he for it, or was he against it? And what do you have to say about this fact that people say that they're 2 sides of the same coin?
Yeah. They were similar in some ways, Kunal, in the sense that, both of them were talking about, for their respective religions or their faiths, Jinnah for the Muslims and Savarkar for the Hindu community. Both were actually non-practicing Hindus and Muslims themselves. Jinnah never read the namaz. He was a wine drinker. I don't know, whether he ate pork or whatever else. And Savarkar was someone who said the cow is not worthy of worship, and it's just something that needs to be protected. He was again anti-ritual. In fact, he also said that when he dies, in his will he said, I don't want any shraddh and other ceremonies to be done for me. He didn't even allow that for his wife, when she died before him. So people who are non-practicing Hindus and Muslims were actually talking for the political, rights of the respective communities. But then this, this belief, even in his lifetime, I think constantly haunted him, saying you two are the 2 sides of the same coin. And, when Jinnah, it was some newspaper which said that, and Savarkar actually rebutted it in his lifetime itself, where he said, we are actually completely different. While Jinnah talks all the time for concessions for his community, I, as in Savarkar, I'm actually striving for no concessions for anybody, for equality for everybody in the eyes of the law. So all through, till the very end in May 1947, as late as May 1947, just a few months before independence, the Hindu Mahasabha that Savarkar led was the only political party which stoutly opposed partition. There was an anti-Pakistan day that was celebrated across the country, all through the 45, 46, 47, leading up to partition, where for the Mahasabha and for Savarkar, the nation's sacred geography also mattered a lot. It was not just a landmass. It was the sacred geography between the Indus and the ocean, which is the land of our forefathers, and which is a land to which we owe our allegiance and all of that, which is how he framed the construct of who a Hindu, according to him, was, not by a religious connotation, but in a cultural, in a nationalistic, identity of a person. So for them to give away land masses like this based on religion, that was something like almost cutting off limbs of your own body. And so the Hindu Mahasabha stoutly opposed any concessions that Gandhi and particularly Congress was making to actually facilitate Jinnah to take away his pound of flesh and leave. So the entire road to partition, I think it's filled with so many duplicitous turn of events, where Jinnah emerged as the ultimate winner, and also was facilitated to get there to a large extent by several Congress leaders as well. If there was someone who was unequivocal in their opposition to partition, it was Savarkar and the other leaders of the Hindu Mahasabha like Shama Prasad Mukherjee and Dr. Moonjay and several others. But then they were in a political minority. They did not have mass electoral support as the Congress had. And so their voices never reached the high table of the Viceroy or the British government.
while reading about him, what I actually found very sort of fascinating is that even though he is the face of Hindutva, there was a lot of backlash in the Hindu community as well, which not many people know about, or not many people speak about. And why was that, and where did that come from?
Yeah, I mean, that's another interesting question. That's probably the maximum opposition to him in his life came from Hindus, and that was largely because of some of the things that he said and wrote and propounded, and the social reforms that he undertook for 13 long years in Ratnagiri, which were earth-shattering. Even today, where caste considerations play to a large extent in the hinterland and in different parts of India, at that point between 1924 and 1937, to open India's first intercaste dining cafe, where people of all castes could sit together and eat. My God, I mean, that was complete anathema. And to have a temple called the Patit Pavan Mandir, where people of all castes could enter, and the priest was actually someone who was from the lowest of so-called lowest of the caste in the hierarchy, and even the Brahmin had to go and touch his feet to take blessings. Having an Asprishya Ganpati, an untouchable Ganpati, taking on the tradition of Tilak, and having a Ganpati Utsav, where the main organizers of this Ganpati were again people from the lowest of the order of the lower caste. And then even the upper caste were actually going and venerating them and mixing with them. Schools where children of all castes and communities could sit next to each other and study, which was again not done before that. Intercaste marriages that he started, and he started democratizing the Vedic literature, which he thought was not the preserve of just the Brahmin community, it was universal knowledge. And if the wearing the sacred thread was what prevented someone from accessing these scriptures, so there was mass sacred thread ceremonies done to all the lower castes. He said, I am a Brahmin, I am a Pandit, so I have the right to distribute these sacred threads to everyone, and let everyone read the Vedic literature. Everyone studies Sanskrit. It's not one particular caste, preserved. So you can imagine the kind of backlash that the orthodoxy would have actually given to this kind of reforms, which were, as I said, earth-shattering and not piecemeal or step by step, where you kind of coax people into your point of view. These were nihilist almost in their approach of changing ground, man in a hurry. And he actually succeeded doing all of this in those 13 years as a pilot project in Ratnagiri. They never got scaled up in the rest of the country because his area of action was limited to that district. But even after he came out of Ratnagiri, murderous attempts were made on his life by several of the Orthodox, community people who said he's spoiling our religion, he's spoiling our caste, and he was welcomed with black flags and stones hurled at him and black paint hurled at him and all of that, both by some of the congressmen as well as some of the Orthodox Hindus who did not, take his words well. So as I said, along with the Muslims being opposed to him, I think some of the maximum opposition the man faced in his life was from traditional Hindus, which is rather, surprising that today he's the father of Hindutva. And Hindutva today, the way it's structured is its upper caste hegemony and Manuvad and all of that. But this was completely different because nobody has read these tenets of Hindutva and how it was conceived, that the Hindu society need to collapse all these differences and consolidate as one group. You can have your differences, you can have diversities, but these are all personal diversities which you can celebrate in privacy. But in the public realm, whether it was political or electoral or whatever strategic, you need to think en bloc was probably what he believed in and propounded.
And actually, that's what your book gave me insights into. I mean, we're talking about somebody who was a social reformer and had incredible ideas about social reform. But now we've reached a place where there's just extreme positions on it.
Yeah.
And strangely, I find like this, we've reached this place in the last maybe 20, 25, 30 years I don't know if there was, growing up, I didn't hear so much about Savarkar. I didn't hear so much controversy, so many extreme positions. Suddenly we reach a place where, he's either a hero or a villain or a good guy or a bad guy. And how did we get here? How did this individual suddenly become so polarizing? And is it like a new phenomenon? Or is it just something that was there and we didn't hear about, and now we hear about?
I think I would call it a more recent phenomena, because even when he died in 1966, the tallest leader of the Congress, the principal opponent of Savarkar's views, and Indira Gandhi, who was the prime minister then, she had such high words of praise for him, that he was cast in the mold of a classical revolutionary, and his contribution in the annals of freedom struggle against British power was something that's very unique, and so on. She got a stamp issued in his honor, which was a big deal in those days. And she also gave from her personal money, she gave grants to a memorial in his name. And the Information and Broadcasting Ministry also had a documentary film made on Savarkar's life. So there was that amount of commemoration about this man, even in the 1970s and 80s. But I think the complete vilification campaign began more towards the end of the 1990s, according to me, with the coming of the first BJP government and Mr. Vajpayee, and what all happened then, including his portrait being unveiled in Parliament. There was a plaque that was being unveiled at Cellular Jail in Port Blair, which after the UPA came to power, Mani Shankar Iyer got that removed and threw it away in the ocean and said, we can't commemorate traitors and all of that. So, and after that, there's been a steady build-up of a narrative that this man was all that I said, all those allegations that he was a traitor, he was sold out, he was coward, he was not Veer. And you repeat a point 100 times and it starts assuming the shape of a truth. And I think that's what has happened in this case. A very recent phenomenon for contemporary politics' sake, where in the Congress-BJP war between each other and one-upmanship, somewhere a historical figure like Savarkar, whom people, for whatever reason, associate with the BJP. But the BJP was not even around when he died. So they may have appropriated the term Hindutva that he conceived of, but how much of it are they legitimate legatees of? No one knows. I mean, a lot of what he said, part of it is implemented, part of it is not. So to that extent, for this targeting your political opponent, like the Congress or the left parties do with the BJP, to drag one of the ideological ancestors who they think Savarkar is of the current BJP, he becomes the fall guy in all of that. And constantly this demonization keeps happening. But I think part of the seed of that was also sown during Nehru's time, where I think Nehru had this huge animosity, personal animosity for Savarkar. And including, I've recounted in the second volume how in 1957, when 100 years of the 1857 uprising was being commemorated in New Delhi, and Savarkar was the one who coined the first war of Indian independence to that 1857 thing, which was otherwise called as Sepoy Mutiny by the British. So there was a program that was to be done in Delhi to commemorate all the revolutionaries who were still alive, and also have Savarkar on the dais, and to invite the Prime Minister then, Nehru, to preside over the event. And Nehru is said to have bluntly refused, saying, I cannot share stage with Savarkar. I don't even consider the book that he wrote as being historical. It's a very nice fictional account. So it'll be embarrassing for both him and me. So you make a choice, he says to the organizers, as to whom would you like to invite? And the organizers actually stuck to Savarkar and not the Prime Minister of India. Right. And I think in that Nehruvian era itself, I often quote this incident, from the film industry, where someone of the stature of Hridaynath Mangeshkar ji, loses his job in the All India Radio only because he tuned Savarkar's Marathi poem Sagara, Pran, Talmalala, and Lataji and Ashaji and all the Mangeshkar sisters sang that. So he's on record saying that he got a show cause notice for that from All India Radio, saying, why have you tuned this? And he said, I gave a two phrase reply, a wonderful poem and a great poet. That's reason enough to tune it, right? And to have my sister sing it. But for that crime, he actually lost his job, that you were actually associating yourself with Savarkar. So the Nehruvian time was like that. But I think the Indira Gandhi phase, I see where there was a little more generosity, there was a little more acceptance. But then post Vajpayee, and of course now after 2014, where every time, the manifestos are made around whether he should get the Bharat Ratna or not. And, I am not Rahul Savarkar and all kinds of things that keep happening in election speeches. The polarization is so complete that any number of facts that may be shown to a politician, I don't think the divisiveness would go away at all.
Right. There's no place for a sort of discussion now. It's either this or either that.
Correct.
There's no sort of middle ground.
Yeah.
And which is why books like yours are great, because as a reader, it gives me an opportunity, like you've been saying, is to make my own sort of informed decision, taking all the facts into account.
Yeah.
It's not, I'm not going by something that somebody said or somebody from this side has said or that side has said. You're giving me a choice to sort of make my own informed decision, which is why it's absolutely great. There's a hypothetical question that I've been wanting to ask you.
Okay.
We've been talking about reality, but just a question that popped into my mind when I was reading the book as well. What if Savarkar was somebody that was actually made the Prime Minister of the country when independence happened? Do you think that this would have been a completely different country? Or do you feel like we would, it would have been pretty much the same place that we are in right now?
Marvaoge, Kunal. So this is like crystal ball gazing of the past. So that's interesting, because many would say that probably these concessions, we would not have had the Kashmir problem for sure, because someone who believed in the might of the army, and unlike Gandhi, who was saying that before independence that post-independence India needs to disband her army. We are a peace-loving nation. We don't even need to have an army in this country, and also fought for transference of 50 crores to Pakistan because of the pledge when the country's assets and liabilities were divided. 50 crores was what the divided India owed to Pakistan. And the Nehru government, particularly Patel, had tried to ensure to twist Pakistan's arm then, because they were making these invasions into Kashmir in the guise of tribesmen who were actually army people from Pakistan, that unless you vacate Kashmir, we are not going to give you the 50 crores. But Gandhi goes on a fast unto death to say it's a gentleman's promise. We have to give this 50 crores. And that 50 crores was probably used against us only and the part of the POK that is still under Pakistan's control. So I'm sure these kind of things would never have been tolerated. And I would time and again say, a father of India's national security, because someone who strongly believed in that foreign relations, when it came to foreign relations, there are no permanent enemies or friends. There's only permanent national interests. So even if it meant joining hands with a Hitler, which even a Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose eventually did, it doesn't really matter, because if that helps our cause of liberating our country, we don't need to go with all these isms of whether fascism is good or Nazism is bad or whatever else. So anything that works for India first. So I think that strong nation, but at the same time, a lot of the, even with China, constantly he was giving warnings to Nehru to be a little more guarded in the enthusiasm that was being shown of Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai and Panchsheel and all of that was being signed with China, saying, let's be cautiously optimistic about this because they are a predatory force. They've invaded Tibet, and India did not even stand up for Tibet or do anything about it. We even vacated our own claim to the Security Council in the UN in China's favor. So a lot of these policy flip-flops, and policy blunders, including taking the Kashmir issue to the United Nations and making it what it is today, and the price of which generations are paying now with their lives and otherwise. I think these things would not have happened. We would have taken a very tough stance right then, and India would not have been seen as this wishy-washy, non-aligned kind of a thing where we, on the one hand, we were so dependent on Soviet Russia, but on the other hand, we were saying we are not aligned to any power bloc of the time. So these things too would not have happened. There would have been a very clearer enunciation of, I think, India's interests in the global stage. And so many of the problems that we have now, we might not have had. There would have been probably a uniform civil code in India. Because if everyone is supposed to be equal in the eyes of the law, there was no room for different personal laws based on religion. And when only one community is asked to probably stick to a secular law while everyone else follows their own. Temples would not have been under government control, while minority institutions continue to have their own hold over it. So I think a lot of India would have been very different from what it is today. But from what I see of his speeches as the Hindu Mahasabha president or the documents of the Hindu Mahasabha, I don't think and believe also that the minorities would be treated as second-class citizens and all that. There would be no such, problems for anybody, as long as everybody stuck to an allegiance to the nation and also staying within the country and not having extraterritorial loyalties and all of that. So I don't know if that kind of summarizes what could India have been.
Yeah, it does summarize it very well.
And a nationalized, including, but of course, economy-wise, I think he and Nehru had some similarities of being socialistic, where he was talking of abolition of landlordism and all industry should be nationalized. Nation is so important that industry or labor or capital or all the other factors of economy were all subservient to national interest, where a very powerful central government, which is like keeping a hawk eye on everything of the national life, whether it is the army, whether it's the economy and all of that, that which probably, so again, Indira Gandhi, who nationalized banks, who did a lot of it, I would consider her to be a very, very more Savarkarite kind of a person who probably believed in a lot of his ideals, including giving Pakistan a bloody nose in the 1971 war or creating Bangladesh and all of that. So he would have probably approved of that.
I'm just going to take a few audience questions.
Sure.
There's been quite a few.
Someone says, if you were to make a film on Savarkar, who would you?
Can you read the questions, Vikram?
Someone asks you that if you were to make a film on Savarkar today, whom do you think will be able to portray Savarkar at his best to the level of how well Ben Kingsley portrayed? You would say
that's a very, very difficult one. I don't know actually who can portray him. I think we'd have to find a whole new actor, like a new actor who is not known and not famous, so that he brings in a whole new freshness, and you view it in a whole, like you've been saying, Vikram, in a more objective way, as opposed to being a fan of the actor. If you were to point out at one person who undermined Savarkar's contribution to the nation, who would that be? Should Savarkar be given the Bharat Ratna? If Savarkar was a non-religious man who did not believe in rituals, why do the left liberals hate him?
So if I could jump in and take the liberty of asking, because it's very tempting.
Yeah, please do.
From the outside. Vikram, I mean, this question is for both of you. Vikram first. Okay. If you get out of the academician and the historian aspect and not take Savarkar as the subject matter of your research, simply as the leader of a freedom struggle, which of the two leaders would you personally follow? Or would it be Gandhi or Savarkar?
I would follow both. I mean, there's no need to be, I think, binary on many characters of the past, because I'm not ideologically, so polarized or inclined. So there are many aspects of Savarkar which I believe and I admire. But there are also many aspects of his which I don't agree. And likewise with Gandhi, where, I mean, Gandhi's eventual to reduce everything to absolute non-violence. I think that according to me was a little problematic, where even the Buddha, there's the story of the Buddha where he tells, I think, a snake or something, that sometimes you have to hiss to ensure that the person who's throwing stones at you understands that you have the power to hit back. Complete non-violence in the face of all kinds of oppression is actually very perverse, and that's something that I would not agree with Gandhi on. But then a lot of Gandhian principles are necessary to probably keep society in order, to keep peace and harmony, which is so essential for a country's progress. So I think a mix and match of so many leaders, including an Ambedkar, Gandhi, a Savarkar, I think Indians are doing that unconsciously. Even the governments are doing that unconsciously, without probably, while of course Gandhi is there everywhere. He's the icon of India. He's there on our currency stamps, to everything about him commemorated. From the Swachh Bharat mission, there is his spectacles and all of that. A lot of Savarkar's philosophy will not be acknowledged publicly, even by those who claim to be his proponents, because of this political untouchability that he's subjected to. But I think a little of everyone we are consciously imbibing today in any case.
And you, Kunal?
I would agree with Vikram, is that I think what's really important is a room for discussion, and a room for, not to demonize and not to make somebody perfect. I think it's very important that we have a ground where people can come together and chat and talk about things and imbibe things and disregard some things. It doesn't have to be about making somebody larger than life, and it doesn't have to be about demonizing anybody. I think you have to pick and choose the best of what they had to offer, and I think that is really important. And I hope we reach a place where I mean, it seems very difficult, the world that we live in right now, not just in India but across the world now. It's very polarized, and there are very extreme views. And I do hope we reach a place where there's more room for discussion.
I'd have a question for you, Kunal, that, yeah, as a both as an actor and as a filmmaker, would people of your ilk actually get scared of touching history and biopics and so on, considering the extreme reactions that history generates, whether it is Baji Rao and Padmavat and Jodha Akbar, and now your upcoming series on Babur and all of that. So, would the film fraternity stay away from historical characters, or would they also be accused of a certain amount of bias about playing up certain characters or playing up certain themes which suit a kind of a narrative?
I mean, I know for sure that there are a lot of stories that people want to tell, but there is a sense of, will these be acceptable or not, and what is the reaction going to be to these, and also, I mean, is there going to be a lot of backlash, or is there not going to be a lot of backlash? So there is definitely a sense of caution about what you can put out about a historical figure, and can you actually take a historical figure and make a biopic on them? I mean, the show that I'm doing right now, it's called The Empire. But, it's based on a book. And it's a book which is historical fiction. And it's not a book that's claiming to be a biopic on anybody, you know what I mean? It's a fictionalized account of somebody's life. But is that also okay? You know what I'm saying? So it is a bit of a tricky situation. I think you have to be sensitive. At the same time, I don't think that you should be completely blind to people's sensitivities. I mean, you can't say that, oh, this is creative liberty and I want to put this out, and even if it offends people and if it hurts people, I'm still going to put this out because it's creative liberty. So I think there has to be some amount of self-regulation. But I do hope that you can put out a lot more stories and people can be more open to them.
Any other question, Mohit, that catches your eye?
Thankfully, being representing a bookshop, this is one of the places where experiments with truth stays in the same shelf as Discovery of India or even Savarkar. So
I'm telling you there, Mohit, that you're perhaps among the few bookstores where all of them, including my books, actually are on the same shelf. So Kunal, in fact, in the prologue to this book also I wrote in the second volume that what really disappointed me after the first volume came out was that there were several bookstores in the country, and I don't want to name anybody. They were like, we have nothing against the author. We've known him. We've known his work for the last decade or so, but we would not want to stock a book on Savarkar in our store. My other books may be there, but then this book will not even be kept there. A lot of mainstream media, particularly print media, would not even engage with the book, even pan it with a review. Nothing about it. While every chicklet, a gossip book or whatever else gets full page coverage in a Sunday magazine or whatever, there's curious lack of engagement with this. And that's the sad part where, people who call themselves liberals, who call themselves
very close to the idea of even having a discussion or, reading an informed sort of.
Correct.
Yeah, which is very sad.
Cancel culture.
sad. Being a bookseller, I can add to that.
Saying we'll be the gatekeepers who will ensure this comes in or that doesn't come in. I think that's very sad. And despite that, for me, for the volume 1 to have gone on to become a national bestseller was completely virtue, social media and word of mouth. I shudder to think if there was no social media and the online presence, how would the book have actually sold if this kind of untouchability was shown to it by several booksellers, not Mohit, but others, and mainstream media, which is horrifying in India of today. Also, this can happen.
Yeah, this whole idea of gatekeepers is, I think, is very scary because you're then exposed to only one point of view, and you don't get a chance to explore a whole different point of view. And like we've been talking, is that it's very important that you give people the option.
Yeah.
If somebody, even if I had to make a film on Savarkar, there would be so many different point of views that I could make a book on. There would be one that would paint him as a hero. There would be one that would not paint him in such a flattering light. You have tried to be objective, so it would be a completely different film. But the thing is, allow me to make all sorts, and then you decide as an audience whether he was a hero or he was not a hero, or he was just a human being who had flaws and who had positive aspects to him. So that, I think, is that whole cancel culture is something that can be very scary.
True.
I think your first book becoming a national bestseller would motivate the other booksellers to keep this one.
What's the next book, Vikram? I mean, first of all, are you done with the Savarkar? I mean, do you feel like you just said that there was a void? In fact, I had a friend of mine who is a famous actor, and he had this very ambitious film that he wanted to make, and he made it, and it did really well. And I asked him, I called him and I said, "You must be ecstatic," and he said, "No, I'm depressed." So I said, "How can you be depressed?" And he said that, I put in all these years into this, and now it's got so much acceptance, and I feel nothing. Yeah. And he's like, after all that, if I feel nothing, the next emotion is depression. So are you left with a sense of a void, depression, happiness, satisfaction? What is it that you're left with now?
Yeah, many mixed emotions, but one is satisfaction. I almost feel, I've written it also, that I feel I've exorcised a ghost. This ghost that came seeking deliverance from me in my pen somehow. I hope I've done justice to its Tadmalati hui Atma. That's how he would describe the sagar that he admonished even in Brighton in London. A soul in torment. And I think there was a need to kind of a closure, at least, in print. And quite surprisingly, Kunal, a lot of these souls in torment come looking for me, including the ones on Gauhar Jaan, which again, a superstar of her times, and later on dies in anonymity, a pastry diva, whom nobody knows today. Even that book, I mean, I was consumed by her for so long that literally I would have dreams about this woman. And, it took a lot of effort to actually get that closure and to move on from this, because you probably start living in another era and probably get schizophrenic if you get too much into the character and the times and all of that. Because like they say for a film, I think it's true of a book too, that you don't complete it, you just abandon it, because there's just enough to kind of keep doing about research. Some new finding may come out which I'd probably not been privy to till then, and that might spur a complete different picture from what's been portrayed till now. So I think at some point one needs to say thus far and no further. And drawing from the same analogy of a love affair, I would say promiscuity is the best antidote to a biographer. So where you keep having many love interests, then you move from one to the other and not get fixated with just one person who's so unattainable anyway in, in real life. So so I'm working now on 3 books. One is so my publishers who might be there. So one is the biography of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. Again, a very, very contemporary, contentious, and debated kind of a person. And another, of course, is again contentious in my part of the country. Tipu Sultan again draws a lot of polarized opinion. And the third book, which I'm coming out first with by maybe next year, is this compilation, as we spoke of, unsung heroes and heroines of India, where sadly, Indian historiography has been been reduced to Delhi centricity. All kingdoms, even small kingdoms, just in and around Delhi. We read so much about them in our history textbooks and in popular discourse, but large parts of the country don't even feature, in our historiography. The Northeast, for instance, we don't even know about the Ahoms there, or the various dynasties of Manipur and other parts of India. South India doesn't feature as much as probably the North does. And this constant narrative that we are a nation of losers. We kept losing battle after battle, from the Battle of Tarain till the Plassey to the 1857 and everything. But if, as Iqbal had said, kuch to hai ki hasti mitti nahi. So what is that kuch? Can we make it tangible? That kuch was also not just civilizational strength, which it certainly was. It was also military resistance that we constantly put to the invaders and drove them away. So who are those heroes and heroines, more interestingly? How many of us know of this lady called Rani Naiki Devi in Gujarat, the Chalukya dynasty of Gujarat, who actually defeated Muhammad Ghori. So shaken was he that he was actually defeated by a woman that he never turned his eyes at Gujarat again. So people like this who are fascinating and from different parts of the country and different eras. Lalitaditya from Kashmir, who defeated the Arabs while the whole of Persia and Egypt and all of that had fallen to the Arab Caliphate might, could not establish power in India beyond the Sindh invasion and the whatever Muhammad bin Qasim did then. The rest of India could not be taken on by the mighty, powerful Arab empire because of people like Lalitaditya. We don't even know about these people. In my own state of Karnataka, again, there was a lady called Rani Abbakka who defeated the Portuguese and drove them out so that they could not take over any of coastal Karnataka. In Kerala, you had this man called Martand Varma who defeated the Dutch East India Company to such an extent that the Dutch power itself dissolved and they never came to India again or tried to occupy it. These should also be our heroes whom we need to celebrate. And these are the stories of national resistance. And a very thin line between chauvinism and revisionism and jingoistic, chest beating, saying Mera Bharat Mahan kind of a thing. But it's not that, but just these very, very fascinating, inspiring men and more women whose names don't feature much in our history. I think those need to come out. So this is a small compilation of about 18 such names from different parts of India and different time spans who put this resistance to their honor and for the country. So trying to bring this out as well next year.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. I'm buying the rights.
Okay. You're making a public statement here, so I hold you to it. And all the people who are there are witnesses. So Mohit, you have ensured there's going to be a future film or a web series show.
On a lighter note, I will just ask one more question and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah.
Vikram, I wish we had more historians looking like you. You know, we all know. I mean, we can't make out which of the two is actually a Bollywood actor and this sort of.
My God, no! Please.
All the pictures of historians we had were totally dry and, you know, differently. It's so refreshing to, you know, listen to you and, of course, read you. And one more thing, I'll just show. I mean, some of you might have already got the copy, the others would. This is the sheer size. And as Vikram had in the beginning mentioned his dear mother, saying that, you know, it's one step to Everest that you have to consider while climbing Everest. This is something, it has to be read one page at a time to have an open and unbiased opinion on an important historic figure. All right, thank you so much, Vikram. It was a delight talking to you and listening to you. Thank you so much, Kunal, for your time, keeping such a volatile and I would say important subject interesting. Thank you, guys. Had a wonderful
time.
Kunal.
Thank you, and
thanks,
best wishes for your forthcoming series.
Thank you, man. Thank you, buddy.
All the unanswered questions can be answered by the book.
That's a good one.
That's great.
Thank you so much, guys. Have a good day.
Thank you for watching this video. If you also love conversations at a bookstore, please do subscribe and like this channel. And if you wish to host your favorite author over a chat, do mention the same in the comment box and witness magic happen. Please also visit our website www.rajatbookcorner. This is Mohit Batra signing off.